So, like many Star Wars fans, I like Star Wars. Just take a look at my Star Wall here. Thing of beauty, isn't it?
I'm also one of at least three people who actually enjoys the holiday special. It's the stuff of legends. Variety show that aired once and only once because everyone absolutely hated it. It needs no introduction. If you're a Star Wars fan, you've heard of it. If you haven't, then you're a choice of four different versions floating around the internet. Some of which still have the commercials intact if you too want to fight the Frizzes 11. And here's the thing. It's not just the stuff of legend, it's also the stuff of Legends continuity. Which, for the unfamiliar, is the term for stuff that used to be canon but isn't since the mouse took over. Do I have an opinion on this process? Yes. Holiday Special is no longer canon. Or is it? Every year I rewatch the Holiday Special in its entirety. It's one of three holiday traditions, along with Muppet Christmas Carol on Christmas Eve, and Muppet Treasure Island, like late December, early January-ish. It's a classic, it's iconic, it's objectively bad, and I love it. And every year, little more it sneaks back into canon. Boba Fett's gun came back via The Mandalorian, Chewie's wife and son came back via the novels, and most recently, the Freaky Hologram Circus came back via Skeleton Crew. So I got to wondering, how much of the holiday special is canon? So I started by rewatching the special again to make a list of what's in each segment and diving deep into Wikipedia to see what's going on there these days. Or just using my own knowledge from the stuff that I've seen and read, or just asking a friend of the channel said or before, who was described by Newsweek as a brazen fan in this 2020 article on the LEGO Star Wars Holiday Special, and who knows more about Star Wars than me. Anyway, on to the canonicity. So, we open on Han and Chewie heading for Chewie's homeworld of Kashyyyk for Life Day, which sounds simple, but actually gives us little to unpack. Obviously, Han, Chewie, and Kashyyyk are all in the movies, so that's pretty much canon, but the rest requires a little more digging. Wookiee Life Day is canon from a few different sources. There's this book, this cookbook, this episode of Star Wars, I forget its name, but the kids show one is mentioned in Mandalorian. There's something else as well, probably, that I'm forgetting. Anyway, does Chewie return home for it in current canon, though? Yes. There's a story from the anthology From a Certain Point of View, titled Wills, that's told from the viewpoint of the eponymous whatever they are. Look, the Wills have existed since the very early drafts of the first film, where it was from the Journal of the Wills. This is Wills with a H, for reference. And I guess in current canon, they're the ones that do the opening crawls? Anyway, one of them mentions wanting to write about Chewie flying home for Life Day, which is a very direct nod to the holiday special.
What? Well, I guess you wanted to get right back to the part where they all help Chewie get back to Kashyyyk to see his son for Life Day. You know, I have some notes here about that.
Yeah, so this whole scene is actually canon somehow. Now we get on to the bulk of the special, untranslated Shiriwook, my beloved. Shiriwook is, of course, the Wookiee language. It's here that we meet Chewie's family, Malla Tobuk, Atichichuk, and Lumpuru, or Malla, Itchy, and Lumpy. All three of these are actually canon. Malla and Lumpy's nicknames are also canon. For sake of convenience, I'm just going to go with Aftermath Empire's End as my source for Lumpy. Short story Tree of Life found in the Life Day Treasury that I showed earlier for Malla. Atichichuk, whose name is spelled differently every time it appears in this script. Look, I know how to pronounce it because I have played Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds. Real ones know. Qui-Gon's Taxi, my boy. Yeah, he's canon thanks to the script and novelization of Solo, a Star Wars story. Then we hit the first weird stumbling block, whittling. Atichichuk is shown carving an X-Wing for his grandson. I had a hell of a time figuring out whether whittling as an art form exists in Star Wars canon right now. Trees aren't that common when you take the whole galaxy into account. They exist. Because of the mouse. There is a store at Blackspire Outpost on Batuu, which for the purposes of this video I'm just going to call Star Wars Land because that's what it is, that actually does have wooden carvings. It's called the Wooden Wookiee. They're not for sale, they're just props. But Wookiee whittling is canon. Good. And there's three quick hits from this scene. Wookiee Yookies, which are these small biscuits and this up here. They're canon as a category. We have a few different varieties from cookbooks and the like. None of which specifically like this, but yeah, I'm giving it a pass. Same goes the general look and feel of Kashyyyk, as its appearance in episode 3 was based on the holiday special. Finally, the freaky little hologram circus Lumpy watches, which was in Skeleton Crew, as I mentioned earlier. Finally, for this scene, with the sort of Dejarik table, I guess, that's projecting one single life-size hologram, and the Imperial flight tracker that Malla uses, which holiday special exclusives and not canon, sadly. So from there, Mark Hamill's contractual obligations come into play. It's shown here that Luke understands a little Shiro look, which I'm going to put this here Jenny Nicholson pen in for later. This gives us one thing to really cover in terms of canon. Luke looking like that. Now, out of universe, we know full well that this makeup is to cover Mark Hamill's injuries from a recent car crash. In universe, the explanation for his changing appearance is he was attacked by a Wampa. We love the Wampa here. Anyway, in universe, we have also seen Luke Skywalker's black velvet and Chanel boots from Return of the Jedi. Makeup is not a stretch. I'm willing to call this canon. On what grounds? Mind your damn business. Only other thing of note to cover here is that R2 was credited as himself for this scene. This because Kenny Baker isn't in there. They didn't need the Kenny Baker. They don't credit the Kenny Baker. Anyway, moving on. We're about to see a whole bunch of stuff in a real short order as Marla reached out to a local trader for help. So right off the bat here, we have Sondan, a trader who isn't canon. Sort of first draft of Lando Calrissian, who is. Needless to say, he was on the films. He did his whole salesman thing with the helmet guy, an Imperial Navy trooper. Those are a thing, this guy specifically isn't. Also another thing, pocket aquariums, wall screens, proton energy packs, groomers, the old XP-21, and laser outlets. But then things get a little interesting, because Sondan accepts either trade or credits for this non-canon grooming implement, and this hybrid tender barter system is canon. Also, he used it in episode 1. He refused to accept several credits, but he readily accepts Qui-Gon's bullshit. Because Targaryens are immune to Jedi mind tricks, but they're not immune to getting fucking played. From there, we go to stock footage Darth Vader and Imperial, which is why James Earl Jones is credited. He provided new dialogue for Vader, a very convenient character to dub, but David Prowse didn't do new wearing the Vader suit, and so he isn't credited for this special, but fuck all that. Right here is my favourite character in the entire holiday special. A real Willrow Hood tier Glupshetto. A joke that maybe 5% of my audience will get. Who is he then? We don't know. Wikipedia credits him as unidentified Moradin Bast lookalike, on the grounds that he looks exactly like Moradin Bast. But Moradin Bast almost certainly died when the Death Star got farm boy, so this can't be Moradin Bast. Instead, he's an unspecified but somewhat high-ranking Imperial officer who looks like Moradin Bast but does not sound like him, and also has ventriloquism skills rarely seen outside of dubbed kung fu movies. He's not canon. Meanwhile, back at the Wookiee household, Mala watches a cooking show in my favourite segment that doesn't feature B. Arthur, and my favourite of Harvey Coleman's 3 roles. And you're not going to fucking believe how much of this is still canon. Commander, the chef, canon back to the latte cookbook.
Back when I was younger, I found a recipe for Bantha Surprise on an old holovid of my favorite chef, Commander.
Bantha Surprise, canon via that same cookbook. Tabalee's mention of the script but not the final special. Also canon via the cookbook. Caloranthrum root is in the visual encyclopedia. Gelto, also canon. Star Wars Land has it in slush form. 2 of the herbs he used, Nagamo and Salonsley, they're not canon. We don't care about those. And right here is where I hit my next weird stumbling block. Because Mala's using a bucket. And it took me a while to figure out whether buckets were canon. At the time of broadcast, buckets weren't canon yet, but they were canonized in episode 5.
This bucket of bolts is never going to get us past that blockade.
Turns out a bucket is a vessel capable of holding bolts. Then we've another scene of Han and Chewie, which is Han and Chewie, alright? Not much to say there. The Imperial broadcast in the next scene refers to Kashyyyk as Kazook. This pronunciation isn't canon, it doesn't appear outside of the holiday special, and is later contradicted by literally everything. It could not be any less canon if it tried. But on the other hand, with martial law on Kazook, Kashyyyk actually was canonically blockaded by the Empire. A different point in time, but I'm calling it close enough. Very important addendum here. What the fuck is this guy's rank? Single row, 2 red tiles, and 4 blue. No canon meaning. The closest we got is Commandant, which is 4 blue and then 2 red. As best I can tell, this guy's a Tanadnamok. Anyway, Sondan comes bearing gifts, including a non-canon tape for the non-canon mind evaporator, which is very clearly porn in the script, and had to be toned down from the original concept, what I've heard. The other 2 gifts are a space boot case and a mini transmitter. The former is later revealed to be a music box, which are canon, this design isn't. The mini translator gets more focus, so go ahead and put a pin in that. This This is followed by a scene with Leia and 3PO fulfilling their contractual obligations. And based on 3PO's choice of words in this scene...
She's with a friend.
Yeah, they fucking... So, we've seen with Sondan that clarifies the alien biscuits are indeed Wookiee. There's this great bit cut from the final special that one of the stormtroopers are about to meet is offered one, accepts it, and then eats it without removing his helmet. And then a scene with Han and Chewie, where nothing much happens relevant to us. And then the Empire arrives. 4 guys, none of them canon. We've a Navy officer with 2 stormtroopers, and we've this guy, who has 6 red tiles, which in current canon is a general, although he's referred to as a commander. Is what it is. We also have Jefferson Starship, who unfortunately aren't canon but used to be, forming Light the Sky on Fire, which is also formally canon, along with Jefferson Starship's other song Hyperdrive, which isn't actually heard anywhere in Star Wars, but it's still Star Wars canon as a result of Slug Throwers Part 2, an article on music in the Star Wars universe. Yeah, it's in there as it was the B-side on some versions of the single release of Light the Sky on Fire, which made the mistake of tying it to the holiday special. Anyway, now that the song is canon, the fun side note here, Light the Sky on Fire resulted in the great god Koba Khan being canonized too. He was a half-hut, half-human whose worship appeared in the X-Wing Rogue Squadron comics. They later tie that back into, yeah, sure, that guy's Koba Khan, why not, fuck it. Okay, 4 scenes to go, we're in the home stretch now. So, Lumpy watches a cartoon, which is based on how he hides it from the Imperials, a piece of real propaganda. The cartoon itself isn't canon, but it is on Disney+. But the existence of real propaganda is canon, surprisingly. We meet someone involved in the production of it from a certain point of view, The Empire Strikes Back, specifically in the story Heroes of the Rebellion.
Capturing Jyn Erso's moving words before she took off to Scarif with the doomed Rogue One group was one of Corwy's greatest achievements as a rebel propagandist.
So Captain Kazan mentioned here isn't canon, but the moon of Pan the Falcon crash lands on actually is, thanks to an encyclopedia. Neat. One thing I want to point out here, Luke can't speak Shirawook, so go ahead and take that pin out of him understanding some of it earlier, because I'm going to talk about that. This is my video essay, and you cannot stop me. The way I see it, this cartoon is probably a dramatization of, actual events, actual things that happened in the universe. Luke and the droids probably did need to rescue Han and Chewie from this moon at some point. Boba Fett was probably involved somehow. And they introduced the magic space talisman to make the story more digestible for kids. And so they give a conveniently rebellion-friendly message to trust your cell and never compromise it for anyone, no matter how friendly they seem. But I like to think that Luke actually did need to bring 3PO with him here to translate it, because at the time he didn't speak Shirawook. Which means that the earlier scene, where he was able to understand some of what Mal was saying, but not all of it, is a result of his efforts in learning it so far, which is just, I don't know, a really neat little bit of continuity that the holiday special does not get enough credit for. About the canon stuff. Big Space Lizard discussed the attacks the Y-Wing, not canon. The ejection pod, however, actually is. It's in the owner's manual.
Technicians modified some Y-Wings to have detachable cockpits that served as repulsor-powered escape vehicles.
Boba Fett is canon. His voice isn't, and his Boba Fett here isn't either. That's probably because it's kind of a bad idea to hire a bounty hunter in the employ of an Empire to voice himself in a cartoon, and the Rebels just got some other guy to do it instead. His gun was canonized by the Mandalorian, everyone knows that one, and his Space Lizard is a Pars Icleodont, which isn't canon, and isn't what you'd expect for an Icleodont. Not very fishy. Anyway, there's a bunch of shit that definitely isn't canon, but it's easily explained by lesbian propaganda. Luke can't understand R2 anymore.
What'd he say?
There's a magic space talisman, there's an Imperial sleeping virus, and Boba Fett is the best bounty hunter in the galaxy.
This time we'll get them all.
I see why they call you the best bounty hunter in the galaxy.
We all know that title actually goes to Blorp.
Missions like this were a necessary part of life on the Mantis. It was difficult to fight the bigger fights when droid bounty hunters called Blorp, Grease had said that was his name, kept trying to blow your head off at unexpected intervals.
So, only things of note here in the next scene are Amorphia, which isn't canon. This guy Dromboid, who I didn't know he had a name either. He isn't canon. And the mini transmitter and the cassettes that the mini transmitter uses also aren't canon. Next up is the unequivocal best segment of the holiday special, Life on Tatooine. Interplanetary live broadcasts, kind of a grey area. Episode 1 has that video call between Amidala and the Trade Federation that kind of fits the bill, but that isn't as long a distance as Kashyyyk to Tatooine. There's a map here that hopefully shows that. Anyway, holodocumentaries, however, are canon, and the Imperial Council mentioned here, in the lead-up to this, are also canon. They were in the novel Tarkin.
But the Emperor's visits had been few and far between, and it was anyone's guess just how much information was getting past the Imperial Council the Moffs and others answer to and actually reaching the Emperor's ear.
Reality TV in the Star Wars universe is sadly not canon. Real Housewives of Nar Shaddaa would have slapped Change My Mind. I will fight you on this. So anyway, we're in the Chalmers Spaceport Cantina, last seen in episode 4, and we see a bunch of Resolid aliens. The ones not named on screen are all actually from canon species, with one exception. I'm happy to call them all canon. The exception is Rose here, the giant rat. I know. She has a name. She was named in the script, and she's a little bit originally from 1976's Food of the Gods. She wasn't quite as friendly there. So, background aliens, everyone but the big rat is canon, which also means I get to play this clip.
What about the ROUSs?
Rodents of unusual size? I don't think they exist.
Named characters then rapid fire round. Ackmena, canon, by both the Marvel comics and several stories from a certain point of view. She's also gay. We love Ackmena. Krellman, not canon, nor is a species. Ackmena's assistant, not canon. Torque, not canon. Kelbo, not canon, but knit to the species are, but his subspecies isn't, because Star Wars is being Star Wars. Zutmore, not canon. Thorpe, not canon. Bloodlow, actually canon.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Barbarine, the name that Ackmena used for the band leader, is a less clear-cut case. Wikipedia identifies this as Figrin D'an, one of the finest jizz whalers in the Outer Rim. That's twice I've said that, it's staying in now, the Outer Rim. With Barbarine being a nickname that doesn't appear anywhere but the holiday special. And if it is Figrin D'an, there's only 4/7 of the model nodes there with him, and no one knows what the fuck is going on there. Ergo, I propose to you that Barbarine isn't Figrin D'an at all, but is another Bith who also happens to play the clue horn and is a band leader of a separate and distinct all-Bith jizz band. Jizz is still canon, by the way. It's in Return of the Jedi Junior novelization.
Although Max Rebo had been leading the ensemble through a variation on a popular Jizweller standard, Cy Snoodles slyly batted her long eyelashes and began belting out improvised lyrics that would have been officially banned by the Empire.
Finally, that brings us to the Tatooine curfew, which isn't canon. And we reach the finale of the special. Han and Chewie show up and save the day, then a bunch of weird shit happens that actually made sense in the script. Somewhere between script and screen, a lot of everything was lost. For all that, Han teases Lumpy by saying that his voice is getting deeper, and honestly, I'm totally fine not knowing whether Wookiee voices deepen during puberty. Life Day robes then, recanonized by the Mandalorian, and the orbs are canon through the Life Day cookbook, and an episode of Young Jedi Adventures, which also brings the lighting ceremony here back into canon, and confirms that good relations with the Wookiees Yoda has. I wasn't kidding. Carrie Fisher insisted on getting a musical number.
Yes, the negotiator.
And then later agreed to the DVD commentary for the original trilogy in return for a DVD of the holiday special.
Yes, the negotiator.
She would then play this when she was hosting a party and wanted everyone to leave. We fucking love Carrie Fisher. R.I.P. Queen. But the thing is, that means there is one legitimate copy of the holiday special on DVD out there somewhere. And as far as anyone knows, it was inherited by Carrie Fisher's daughter, Billie Lourd, who you may recognise from The Rise of Skywalker. This is just speculation, but, Ms. Lord, if you are through some unspeakable tragedy watching this video, I will personally pay $5 entire for that DVD plus shipping in the name of media preservation. Anyway, that's all the evidence examined. We now know what, at the time of writing this, end of December 2024, is and isn't canon. And hey, more can always come back. The only way is up. All this in mind is the holiday special canon. What the hell is canon anyway? If canon is the movies, anytime a lightsaber bloodlessly slices up a limb isn't canon. If canon is the most detailed sources, parts of the movies aren't canon. And when everything is a primary source, nothing is. Let's pretend for a moment there's some perfect true canon, free from contradictions. Who decides that? George Lucas, the original creator, Bob Iger, the head of the company that owns the franchise, Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, Marcia Lucas, editor of the original trilogy, Dave Filoni, who is, and I cannot stress this enough, literally Dave Filoni. The answer is no. There is no one true canon. The whole point of fandom is that canon is what you make of it. You keep the parts that work and ignore the parts that don't. Like Dracula, or the Ewok movies, or Acolyte, which for the record, I really enjoyed. Manager Shinto has both the action and comedy chops to play live-action Goku. Changed my mind. So, more importantly, however, the holiday special is 100% canon, and I will fight you on this. Special thanks to friend of the channel Sidle before for encouraging my Star Wars brainworms as per usual, and to Charlie Marlowe, also a friend of the channel, who lent the voice to various parts of this video. You may also have heard of them from Mystery Chat Look Back or from Will Bridge Me Princess, which are both really cool projects, links in the description. I highly recommend you check them out. Roll credits.
Thank you.